Hello, my name's Elijah Wells, and today, or last night really, BFI through Sight and Sound has released their greatest films of all time list. If you don't know what Sight and Sound is, it's basically one of the most oldest and most prestigious, one of the most prestigious like film magazines out there. Like something like something more like influential, let's say, like more than Empire or Total Film. Like this is like one of the most famous film magazines out there, and they do this greatest films of all time list like every like decade or so. Like they did one from years that ended with a 2, like 1992, 2002, 2012, and this year, of course. And this year there's been a lot of notable changes, so I'm going to break them down for you and what are my thoughts on these films on the greatest films of all time lists. Even though I'm seeing this off my laptop, I'm just going to read them off my laptop. Some of these films are being tied at a certain number, like starting like at 95, there's like 6 or so films that are tied at number 5, since it is voted like by film directors and film academics and maybe some invited guests. Like starting off, there's Get Out by Jordan Peele, which is a great movie, and I like a lot of his films he's done. The General by Buster Keaton, Black Girl by Osami Mizen, Tropical Melody, Once Upon a Time in the West, yep, A Man Escaped, Madine D, The Leopard, sorry if I mispronounced it, from 1953 from Japan, Yuji, from number 90 at Yuki's Monogatari. Sorry if I completely butchered the pronunciation of that. There's Edward Wong's Yi Yi. Again, I've heard a lot of good things about it. And there's also at number 90, Parasite by Bong Joon-ho. Like that is one of my favourite films that have come out like from the past few years or so, and definitely one of the greatest films in living memory. And also really great that Bong Joon-ho is getting a lot of recognition. Like he did Memories of Murders, he did Snowpiercer, and this is of course his magnum opus. Even though I remember Snowpiercer getting some attention in the United States, but at least he's getting a lot of love at the moment. There's Wong Kar-wai for Chungking Express, which is a great film, by the way. I think he also did like In the Mood for Love, which might be on this list, but most likely not. But he also did 2046 as well, and also announced he's making a sequel to the latter film. But again, Chungking Express at 88, great film. The Shining, okay. Yes, this list, I've already read it already. It does have the 2001 Space Odyssey, but surprisingly doesn't have like Clockwork Orange of his film, since I think that's more of a British iconic film in my opinion. Even though 2001 is a great movie, and it doesn't even have Doctor Strangelove on there either. But again, this is again, I'm kind of a little bit taken back since they didn't like include Clockwork Orange, but yeah. There's Histories du Cinema by Jean-Luc Godard, the great late director who passed away recently. Paris de Feu by Jean-Luc Godard, Spirit of Beehive, and there's also at 84 there's Blue Velvet, or tied at 84, Blue Velvet. Again, even though it does say later down the list that Mulholland Drive is like in the top 20, I guess. Even though, in my controversial opinion, I think Blue Velvet's, it's a better film than Mulholland Drive, but hear me out. Even though I imagined Mulholland Drive, it's gonna be like Memento, where you're gonna have to do repeated viewings of the movie just because it's impossible to get it at the first time. I think this movie kind of plays with you on a mental and psychological level. I think for Blue Velvet, I think it's to be honest, it's just a bad movie, and he did conceive, David Lynch conceived Mulholland Drive as a mini-series, like Twin Peaks or something, but again, I'm maybe getting over my head, but I think Blue Velvet should be a little bit higher. There's Celine and Julie Go Boating, A Matter of Life or Death by Michael Powell. Again, it does have his film, I think, Red Shoes as well. I think it does include his other films like Black Narcissist or Peeping Tom. And Lato is a brilliant film as well, which, again, I'm not sure Black Narcissist is in this list, but I don't remember seeing Peeping Tom on there at all. Like, again, I think it influenced filmmakers like Martin Scorsese. Like, he opened up to him essentially. There's Modern Times by Charlie Chaplin. Yeah, Bright Summer Days, Santiago Tango, Sunset Boulevard. Yep, that should be on that. Sergio or Ballo. Imitation of Life. Again, this is a very interesting film I've seen at college, which is basically set in the 50s. It basically stars a biracial woman who is very convinced that she's white. Like, she has a really full-blown identity crisis. Again, takes place at a time when interracial relationships and biracial children were really taboo. Again, this was before Virginia v. Loving Supreme Court case, or one of the Supreme Court cases that Justice Thomas really doesn't like, even though he's in an interracial relationship. But again, another film you definitely want to check out if you haven't already, by Douglas Sirk. And also, we have Hayao Miyazaki's 2001 masterpiece, Spirited Away. Again, definitely one of my all-time favourite movies at 75, Spirited Away, a brilliant movie. It has been on loads of lists, like greatest movies of all time, and I think it's also like one of the only animated films on a lot of these lists, or, again, very interesting stuff. And this is where it kind of gets a little bit weird. Like, at 72, Hayao Miyazaki's at it again with My Neighbor Totoro. Again, Spirited Away is a better movie, even though My Neighbor Totoro, it is definitely a brilliant movie. I'm not talking crap about the movie, but Spirited Away is it's better. It's just a better movie. And again, I've just checked through this list numerous times already, but these are the only two animated movies on there, like, which is a little bit weird, I guess. Like, I think if you want to include like the greatest animated films of all time in a greatest films of all time list, I think maybe like Snow White, Lion King, or something from DreamWorks. I don't know if it's culturally important like Shrek, or critically like Prince of Egypt maybe, or stuff from like other American studios like Into the Spider-Verse. Even though this again, Sight and Sound doesn't rate highly on like high budget films or Marvel, so I think you probably should know by now what their views on Marvel films, as in they do probably like them, I guess. And also maybe include some more anime movies. Like, again, these are both animes essentially. Like, maybe include something like Akira, Ghost in the Shell, Perfect Blue, maybe Your Name, End of Evangelion. Again, I think it's just the two anime films, both by Miyazaki. Like, I feel like they could like flesh out a little bit more on that area. There's Journey to Italy, Little Adventure, Metropolis, which is like really early sci-fi by Fritz Lang. Yeah, like really early sci-fi movie. Something I do wanted to check out for a long time. Clinazar and I by sorry if I botch her name, the late Agnes Valda. Red Shoes by Michael Powell. Again, no peeping Tom anywhere. Legit by Chris Marker, which I have actually seen like clippets of the movie from a French film from 1962. This movie essentially opened up to Terry Gilliam's 12 Monkeys. Like narrative-wise, it was essentially based. It essentially got remade into 12 Monkeys, which is a brilliant movie. There's Andrei Rublev by Andrei Tarkovsky, which I did read his book, A Sculpture in Time. Even though I kind of would have read it when I was in university, but I read it before I went to university, and I couldn't like process what he was trying to say, just because it was very heavily detailed, very heavily worded. And there's Touka Buka from Senegal, 1973, Casablanca from 1942 by Michael Curtis. Again, a brilliant movie if you haven't seen that movie, and it's definitely a 40s icon. Essentially, it's an allegory of America kind of just sitting back during the early days of World War II, but when stuff just goes down, America just had to get involved. That's kind of speaking in a more of an allegorical sense. There's Ferdinand by Carol Reed, a great film, brilliant performance by Orson Welles. There's Goodfellas from 1990 by Martin Scorsese. Again, this is my favourite Scorsese film, which is Goodfellas, brilliant movie. I think it got a lot more attention since Ray Liotta passed away recently. And also Martin Scorsese is like the biggest critic of like Marvel movies, which can't blame him because Thor Love Thunder wasn't that great really. And also that his daughter does some of the best TikTok videos out there, not some cringy stuff. Daughters of Dust, Moonlight by Barry Jenkins, like one of the more recent films on the list. Definitely up there with like Parasite and A Portrait of a Woman on Fire. Again, this is like one of the more earlier films out there. There's La Dolce Vita by Federico Fellini, but I think the one film everyone's talking about is 8½, which is definitely on this list, which is a brilliant movie. There's Ansel Lee by Chris Marker, seen clips of that. Sherlock Jr. by Buster Keaton. The Apartment by Billy Wilder. Battleship Potemkin by Sergei Einstein. Which I think this movie again opened the doors for films like The Untouchables by which is a film from the 80s starring Sean Connery. I'm trying now to finger who directed it now. Yeah, Sean Connery and Kevin Costner, which has that scene in a railway station where there's a baby stroller that's literally going down railway stairs and they had to fight off a bunch of gangsters. One of them being Capone, being betrayed by Robert De Niro. And of course, at 54 there's Blade Runner by Ridley Scott from 1982, which is again one of my all-time favourite movies, and it's definitely my definitive all-time favourite Ridley Scott film. Particularly, even though Gladiator is definitely close second, and Alien is also up there with my top favourite films by him. Again, Blade Runner I feel like it's the most triumphant of his film, and the most sentimental, and the most atmospheric, and most aesthetically pleasing of his films. There's Les Mis from Jean-Luc Godard, News from Home, Theory Soul, The Piano by Jane Campion, which she also, I'm not too familiar with her work, unfortunately. I think I definitely watched her Netflix film, Power of a Dog, which is pretty beautiful to watch. Again, I'm not too familiar with like New Zealand cinema, outside of like Taika Waititi or Peter Jackson. Yeah, I kind of wish I could see more of them. The Foreigner Blows by Francis Truffaut. You may know him as one of the characters from Close Encounters of the Third Kind, but he also directed that film, Jim and Gillette, which is, I think it's I think it's definitely a slightly better film, but Foreign Blows is essentially like a semi-autobiographical film about him, since he was essentially a delinquent at school. Like he constantly got into trouble, he constantly got into police, to the point at the final 5 minutes of the film he just essentially had to be at some sort of boarding school, which they didn't hugely elaborated on. And now we're at the top 50 of the section. Like we have Wonder by Barbara Loredan, Odin, North by Northwest by Alfred Hitchcock. I think there should be films like Psycho or Rear Window in the mix somewhere. There's Battle of Eight Angles, Barry Lyndon, again No Clockwork Orange from Stanley Kubrick so far, Killer of Sheep, which is a brilliant movie. Even though it was done in 1977, it was not released until 2007 due to some copyright issues. But it's definitely an extremely intimate look of an African American family living in what looks like in a Californian setting. It's almost like a fly on the wall documentary. Again, some pretty interesting stuff. There's Stalker by Andrei Tarkovsky. I think one of the more imagery, like Solaris, like his more famous film, like all the imagery is famous from Stalker and Solaris. Rashomon by Akira Kurosawa. Again, my favourite film from Akira Kurosawa is the 1985 film Ran, which is loosely based off the Shakespeare play King Lear. Yeah, but Rashomon is again famous for the Rashomon effect, like two different perspectives from the same story. Bicycle Thieves, again, a brilliant film, a brilliant look on the post-World War II, post-fascist era Italy, like when Italy was just bringing itself back up again after after being defeated and had its dictatorship overthrown. Rear Window by Alfred Hitchcock at 38, which again it should be a little bit higher considering this is like a brilliant thriller movie. Some Like It Hot by Billy Wilder, but very famously has Marilyn Monroe in the movie. Even though her actress had been in some controversy, particularly with the recent Blonde movie, which I've only seen like the first half of the movie, but apparently the second half just gets really nasty. So might proceed with caution with this. About to suffer, Sifu from 1960, Jean-Luc Godard again. I think there's a lot of Jean-Luc Godard films because he like recently passed away recently, and two, he's like made like he essentially makes a film like every other year, like looking from his filmography, like he makes a film like every other year. M by Fritz Lang after he did Metropolis, City Lights by Charlie Chaplin, Panther Party from Ray, L'Atlantique by John Vigo, Psycho by Alfred Hitchcock, Fat 31 should be on there, yeah, definitely, very good. There's Mirror by Andrei Tarkovsky, 8.5 by Franco Fellini. Again, I feel like this should be a little bit high on the list. Again, this is one of the more famously weird and more postmodern movies out there. Like, it's famous because of that, and also basically about a director and writer who's going through a writer's block and just kind of contemplating his life decisions. Like, it's definitely one of the more weird films on the list, but definitely a very interesting film nevertheless. At 30, there's Portrait of a Lady on Fire, like one of the more recent films. Like, I remember, like this film is still being talked about on social media, like loads at the moment. Taxi Driver by Martin Scorsese, even though, again, great film, but Goodfellas is, in my opinion, the best Scorsese film out there. But great film, Taxi Driver, but Goodfellas is a better film. And again, with 8.5, there's Daisies from 1966 from Czechoslovakia, which is definitely a really weird, really trippy movie. Even though I think this movie kind of sticks with you in the long run, just because the amount of weird imagery that goes down in this movie. Like, I kind of thought this movie was mostly an allegory of like two Czechy girls just tripping balls on something, but if it boils down to something, it's basically about two rebellious girls somewhat revolting against the communist government. Like, the director even got banned from filmmaking for a couple of years just for the rowdiest reception the film got. Even though I didn't quite get it, after some processing from the initial viewing, I kind of like, maybe I get it, yeah, maybe I get it. And there's also 1985's from Claude Lanzmann, Shoah, which is one of the most famous documentaries out there, so much so. It's basically a documentary about the Holocaust, but it's also famous for its a pretty brutal runtime, like 7 hours long. Like, I think you might have to watch, spend like a couple of days just trying to finish this movie. Like, even outside of its really vast and really strong way of how it navigated its really difficult subject matter. The movie did also like open its doors to Schindler's List by Steven Spielberg from 1993, which again I'm a little bit surprised that it's nowhere on this list, since I think the one film that I think Spielberg would be one film from Spielberg that would be on a lot of like greatest films of all time lists is probably like Schindler's List, but again I'm not seeing it anywhere on this list at all. But at least we got the documentary, sure, which I remember seeing a DVD of it in a charity shop, and it was like marketed as like a mini series just because it was just such a pretty lengthy movie. There's Knife a Hunter and The Arch Hassan Azizen from Robert Beesman from 1966 from France, Sweden to N25. Now we're on to the final stretch of the main list. There's Do the Right Thing by Spike Lee at 24, Playtime 23, there's Late Spring at joint 21 with Passion of Joan of Arc, Seven Samurai by Akira Kurosawa, and then 19, Apocalypse Now. Again, definitely a deserved spot on this list, since a lot of people do put the Godfather film very highly in a lot of their lists, like even the best film of all time. Again, I'm very pleased Apocalypse Now got some praise. I wonder which version though, if it's like the theatrical version, the deluxe version, or the final cut version though. There's Persona from 1966 from Sweden, Close Up from 1989, Measures of the Afternoon, The Searchers by John Ford, who's also been portrayed by David Lynch in the Fablesman movie, which I definitely want to check out. Seal from 5 to 7 from 62. Sorry if I mispronounced it, from 1939 by John Renard. Le Reggae du Roi. And there's number 12, The Godfather by Francis Ford Coppola. Again, a little bit surprised this is not a top 10, considering how extremely well known, extremely iconic, extremely critically acclaimed it is. Maybe Godfather Part 2, maybe like leapfrog the film, but yeah. There's Sunshine, the Song of Two Humans, Singing in the Rain, A Man with a Movie Camera. There's Mulholland Drive at 8. Again, I might want to watch the film again, but I think for now, Blue Velvet's a better film from David Lynch. Again, even though it was initially conceived as a mini-series, but throughout production it just became a movie for some reason, but even though it's definitely one of the weirder films out there, but I think I might want to watch it again though. Bureau Travelera by Claire Denis. 2001 Space Odyssey, In the Mood for Love. Again, even though I haven't seen the film yet, but I heard loads of good things about it, mainly because I really liked this film, Chungking Express. There's Tokyo Story at number 4. Citizen King number 3, yep. Vertigo at number 2, and number 1 is Jenny Dalman 23 Quado Commons 1080 at Brussels. Again, this is the number 1 film for the next 10 years or so, which again really surprised me at the moment, just because I don't see this movie a lot of the top 10 greatest films of all time, but I definitely have seen it like more chunkier versions of like the greatest films ever made. And it'd be if I did make an essay that even though the previous list had been considered extremely sexist, as there were just like 2 film directors on this list, 2 female film directors, well, films directed by them were on the list, and considering what the trends were recently, like not just the Me Too movement that just went down a couple of years ago, there are a lot more female filmmakers out there, like Greta Gerwig, or there's also Chloe Zhao, Lulu Lang. Again, just to name a few directors out there. Again, some very interesting stuff going down there, but very surprised that this is at number 1. Even though this was the top 10 films, there's also the director's version of the 100 greatest films ever made, which is chosen by directors from all around the world, even though they're going to release a list soon of who directed who, since I remember Edgar Wright being very vocal about his participation in this list. I'm just going to do a mini highlight on this list, like there's Throne of Blood by Akira Kurosawa, there's Parasite, again at 2019 by Bong Joon-ho, great movie. There's also Confronted List from 1970, there's The Hidden from 2004, and also there's Eternal Sunshine of a Spotless Mind, which is definitely one of the weirder, one of the more trippier movies out there, with starring Mark Ruffalo, Elijah Wood, Jim Carrey, Kate Winslet. Again, this is definitely from that 2000s indie movement, like which I do remember fondly about. Red Shoes by Michael Powell, which again I've seen clips of that. Wild Strawberries by Ingmar Bergman. Yeah, not surprising, no Fanny or Alexander really, but kind of wish it was there. Sure again, Blue Velvet again. And also there's Searchers. And also, surprisingly at 72 at the director's list, there's Kes by Ken Loach, which again, even though he's not too internationally well known, the director, but he is very fondly liked in his country, particularly in his films like I, Daniel Blake, or The Wind That Shook Bailey. Even though he had some minor controversies, particularly with his politics, again, I think Kes is maybe his more internationally well-known movie. Again, it's surprising he wasn't included in the main list either. There's A Separation from 2001 from Iran, which definitely got some praise, particularly about the divorce proceedings in essentially an oppressive regime like Iran. And also, really controversially, there's Salo, or The 120 Days of Sodom, like, definitely considered one of the most controversial films ever made, and one of the few films that are still banned in many countries to this day, even if it's now like nearly 50 years old, and still pretty controversial. Even though I do not want to talk about this movie, even though I've not seen the movie, just on sole purpose that I could possibly get demonetized, or my manager at the place I work at just looks at me like, why did you like talk about this in your video? Like, I'm not mentioning it. If you're squeamish, don't Google 20 Days of Sodom, 120 Days of Sodom. There's The Conversation by Francis Ford Coppola. Again, this is the decade where he ruled the world. There's Akira from Akira Kurosawa. There's Seventh Seal by Ingmar Bergman, which surprisingly wasn't in the main list either. There's 72, there's Chinatown by Roman Polanski, even though I think there's other films that could have made this list, like Rosemary's Baby or The Pianist. I think really it's just his allegations of sexual assault that really soured everyone's public perception of him. Which, again, less about him the better. 62, there's Jaws by Steven Spielberg, which, again, a very surprising addition, just because I think, like I said earlier, I think the one film I imagine being on this, being on the main list, being Schindler's List, but there's Jaws there. Lawrence of Arabia, again, a director's list, but not in the main list, which very surprising, I guess, since, again, a lot of people consider one of the most epic films ever made. Some Like It Hot, Blade Runner, Sunset Boulevard, and there's Fanny and Alexander and Eraserhead at 53. Again, two films that did not make it in this main list, considering this is David Lynch's famous debut film and his introduction to the world of like surrealist horror, psychological thriller, body horror, which he's become very well known for. Fanny and Alexander, which is like a 3-hour-long movie, which is, again, for patient watching. There's also Don't Look Now by Nicholas Orong from 1973, which I've been introduced to a lot at uni. Doctor Strangelove, which I've seen a couple times, great film. City Lights, Once Upon a Time in the West, and there's also that 41 Come and See by Emily Kimnoff, which is considered one of the most depressing or most deprived films ever made, and one of the most shocking films out there. Like, the movie, essentially about Belarusian village waiting for an incoming Nazi invasion, and when it comes, it does not shy away from the worst stuff the Nazis did. Again, this is considered one of the most shocking, like one of the most grim movies out there, and it also like opened the doors to other Spielbergian films like Schindler's List and Saving Private Ryan. And there's also Night of a Hunter, and The Jetty, 400 Blows, The Passion of John Jett, Do the Right Thing, Goodfellas, Godfather Part 2. Again, I thought it was going to be at further up the list, but it isn't. There's also Martin Scorsese's films, like at 28 there's Goodfellas, but at 22 there's Raging Bull. Brilliant movie, Raging Bull. I think I might put it higher than Taxi Driver, but not as high as Goodfellas, since Goodfellas is the best Scorsese film out there. Mulholland Drive at 22, Bicycle Thieves at 20, Apocalypse Now at 18 though. There's also Barry Lyndon at 12, even though I don't think it was even that high on the main list though. 8.5. And also, I forgot to mention that the number one of the main list being Jean Darman 23 Quadru Commons 1080 Brussels. Even though this is a 3-hour, an over 3-hour long movie about the slice of life of a housewife in the Belgian capital, again, I might definitely want to check it out if it comes across to me. There's Tokyo Story, Godfather, Citizen Kane at number 3, Godfather, 2, Citizen Kane, number 1, 2001 Space Odyssey by Stanley Kubrick. Although admittedly some weird curveballs here and there, I think I probably will go to like the recent list from BFI or Sight and Sound magazine for their greatest films of all time. I think, to be honest, I think the director's list feels a bit more telling about the film landscape. To be honest, like the director's list, but I'm just going to put these both the list down just so for any film or director I completely botched the title of, you can totally get it. And also, you can have your opinion of what these films should have really been our top 10. And also, this is like the same company that this is definitely a list with full of like high budgeted films or like superhero movies, even though, again, I think they're not really that great, or maybe a few legitimately great films like The Dark Knight, which I really liked, Again, I'm very pleased about both lists, even though I'm going to raise the director's list a lot higher, just because I think it just speaks more to my preference, speaks more to the film landscape, in my opinion. And that was the Sight and Sound's best films of all time list. Let me know in the comments what are your favourite films on the list. Subscribe to my channel, follow me on Twitter and Instagram, and this is Elijah Wells, and bye!